Did this year's SummerSlam save the WWE? I know what you're thinking. That's a very bold statement, and at this point, can anything save the WWE? After a poor received two-night WrestleMania filled with ads, celebrities, and questionable decisions, WWE has lost the plot a little bit in recent months. But we had a two-night SummerSlam with a lot of ups and some downs. But I do think this show proved one thing right. When you make the right logical decisions that the fans like, then it's typically received well. So give me a few minutes of your time. I'm going to unpack this year's SummerSlam and talk about the highs and lows of this year's show. Kicking off night one, we had Liv Morgan defending the WWE Women's Championship against Iyo Sky. And this was Liv's first title defense since WrestleMania, where she won it over 100 days with no title defenses. It seems like after Stephanie Vaquer got injured, they really didn't know what to do with the women's title. And in some ways, the Women's Intercontinental Championship was the main women's title focused on Raw these past few months. I thought this was a great opening match. I thought it really set the pace for the night to come. Liv and Iyo had some great back and forth and some great spots. I really liked the finish of this match where Iyo kind of blocks and rolls through from the Oblivion, but Liv doesn't let up and Iyo turns, eats a code breaker, and then Liv hits the Oblivion for the 1-2-3 and the win. With Liv retaining here, I'm really interested to see what they have in store. I thought in some sense they were just going to pivot to Iyo because obviously they didn't have any stories for Liv. Raquel is the new Women's Intercontinental Champion, and it looks like they were teasing in the past couple months some tension and some breakup, but then that makes me think maybe they're just going to keep the Judgment Day women together. I'd love to see Roxanne break away from the group and maybe be a contender to Liv. I'm interested to see what this means for Iyo Sky. Is there a future rematch with Liv Morgan on the table? Could we see her transition into the women's intercontinental scene? I hope Liv retaining means that they do have something meaningful lined up leading into the fall. Overall, I thought this match was great. It was a great opener to the card and really got the energy going. Next, we had the Bloodline, the team of the Usos and Jacob Fatu versus LA Knight, Solo Sikoa, and Royce Keys. I've been super critical of the Bloodline story getting kind of run back lately. In some ways, it seems like we were just rehashing the same story that was told with basically the same cast of characters. I was really disappointed when Jacob Fatu kind of fell in line, became the enforcer for Roman and the Usos, although I think his take on it compared to Solo is different, how he's kind of like this rabid animal that Roman Reigns is sicking on his adversaries. And it is nice to see the Usos, specifically Jey Uso, kind of get back into that heel role. I was kind of getting some fatigue from Jey Uso and the yeeting and all of that. Kind of felt like he works so much better in the ring and on the mic as a heel. And I was really concerned about LA Knight kind of being stuck in this Bloodline vortex still. Felt like, I don't know, maybe there's something else for him to do on the show. But the one thing that I was worried about the most was that Solo Sikoa was going to fall in line too and just rejoin the Bloodline, which would be a shame because he's probably the most entertaining he's been in a long time right now. It's crazy to think Solo was cast for so long as just the silent muscle, because in the last few weeks we've seen so much personality from him. His mannerisms and body language and the way that he can kind of incorporate comedy, especially in some of the backstage stuff he's done with LA Knight and Royce Keys, I think is really giving Solo a depth to his character that he is sorely needed for many, many years. And for Royce Keys, it was good to see him as a part of SummerSlam kind of be a part of like this integral storyline on Raw, somehow get involved due to past relationships with Jacob Fatu and the Bloodline. And at first, what seemed like kind of just a throwaway six-man tag actually became a really fun match. I have nothing but positive things to say about this. I thought the Gears of War entrance from the Usos and Jacob Fatu was interesting, but hey, TKO can't resist those ad placements and entrances. Next, we had Gunther taking on Nick Aldis in his first WWE match. I'm going to be honest, I've been super confused with what they're doing with Gunther post-retiring John Cena and AJ Styles. And I get it, that's the top of the mountain. It's hard to follow up on something like that. And obviously a situation with Seth due to injuries and that kind of being thrown together for WrestleMania, they made the most of a hard situation. But then when Gunther went after Cody in the WWE Championship, I thought, okay, this makes sense. Cody needed to lose the belt. Gunther needed something to solidify him after those big matches. I was like, all right, yep, heel Gunther, WWE Championship, this makes sense. And then it just never happened. We just got screwy finish after screwy finish. I feel like it really just made Gunther look weak. And then he seemingly got transitioned out of that title picture temporarily while Punk and Cody had their feud. And then again, here at the second biggest show of the year, we had him facing Nick Aldis in his first match. Now, no hate to Nick Aldis, but this was a little bit of a head scratcher to me. It seemed like a little bit of a step down or just like adding more to the like, they don't know what to do with Gunther problem. That being said, I thought this match was awesome. It was really cool to see Nick Aldis finally get his moment in WWE. I mean, he's younger than most of the main event guys in WWE right now if you look look it up. And no, the shirt isn't on purpose, it's a happenstance, but it was cool to see him come out. Came out to Morning Glory by Oasis. The crowd went crazy, and it was hard to believe, like, whoa, this is this guy's first match in front of a WWE audience. The match itself was nothing spectacular, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It wasn't flashy or anything like that, and that's kind of what you would expect from these two guys. They just had, and I mean this in the best way, a straightforward good guy versus bad guy wrestling match, and the crowd ate it up. And even in defeat, I thought Nick Aldis looked great. It really made me be like, man, maybe they should just make him a full-time wrestler, even though he's so great in that GM role. And then following the show, we saw him hand his resignation to Triple H and say he's a man of his word. He's going to step down as SmackDown GM. Triple H rescinded that notion and told him, no, you are reinstated as the SmackDown GM, and that would actually come into play as we talk about night 2. Next, we saw the Bellas and Paige versus Fatal Influence in a 6-women tag team match. When Fatal Influence first debuted on SmackDown, they had one of the best debuts, especially as a women's group for the first time in a long time. They instantly made an impact going after the tag team titles, and JC Jane kind of made her intention as going after Rhea Ripley for the women's championship, and they were getting some serious reactions. It was good to see them win the tag team titles from Brie and Paige at Saturday night's main event, and then Nikki Bella returned to be the perfect 3v3 tag team match for SummerSlam. This match was fine. I think a lot of it was due to the early injury to Brie Bella, which sucks to see, especially someone like her that has never been injured, especially after Nikki just came back from injury. It seems like they can't catch a break either way, and due to that injury, it seemed like there was some clunkiness or some reshuffling of what was supposed to happen in this match. I thought Fatal Influence came across great in this match. Seemed like they were able to kind of course correct and fix some of the spots that were then ruined in the match due to the injury. I think maybe we were working towards a JC Jane Rhea Ripley match at SummerSlam, but then with the interim title and her injury, things kind of got shuffled around. We saw JC Jane pin Paige for the win. I know the group is kind of focused around JC Jane as the star, and obviously she was the NXT Women's Champion, and it's kind of the focal point of the group. But I think Fallon Henley is super underrated, and in a couple years she'll be someone that we're talking a lot more about. After the match, we could see that Brie was hurt, but they still went through with what was planned, and we saw the Bellas turn on Paige. I'm interested to see where this goes, obviously due to the injury. It seemed like people were saying maybe we could get Paige and AJ versus the Bellas, kind of run back that Divas era. Next, in the semi-main event, we saw CM Punk defending the WWE Championship against Cody Rhodes. If you go back to some of my previous videos, particularly my WrestleMania 41 predictions, I have been talking about this match for a few years now. To me, this was one of the biggest matches that WWE could do at the time, and here we go, we were finally seeing it. But if I'm being honest, it didn't really come across in the build as to how I anticipated it. If you look at all the interactions Cody and Punk has had, they've been teasing this for a long time, pretty much since Punk's return. The Royal Rumble prior to WrestleMania 40, we saw the in-ring promo between the two, and tensions were building, and then we saw them do that again the following year, going into WrestleMania 41 at that year's Royal Rumble, and it seemed like these two were eventually to be set on a collision course. Something that was only amplified with the night after WrestleMania, where Punk came out and talked about how he lost and Cody won, and that Cody shouldn't be bitter, he's the winner, Punk was the loser. But then Punk dropped that line about, you never know when the title match may fall out of the sky. And a few weeks ago, that's exactly what happened. Sami Zayn had to defend the WWE Championship, Cody got taken out by Gunther, and lo and behold, they were in Chicago, Illinois, and the championship opportunity for CM Punk fell right out of the sky, and he capitalized on it. He beat Sami Zayn and became the WWE champion. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't feel like the build to this was terrible. It just seemed a little rushed. It seemed like we only had 3 weeks to build maybe the biggest story that WWE could tell right now. And while they had some great promos, particularly on the Go Home one from SmackDown, it felt like maybe this needed a couple more weeks to really simmer to the point that it could. I think one of the things that this match had working against it too, but also added an interesting dynamic, is both of them were faces per se. Both of them were good guys going into the match, and sometimes doing a good guy versus good guy match was hard. But if anyone could do it, it's these two, both kind of always teetering on that tweener line, especially Punk. I feel like he can toe that line so perfectly. It's one of the best things about Punk. It doesn't really matter what his true alignment is. He just does what serves the match. But funnily enough, in the match, we kind of saw Cody working as the heel, targeting Punk's knee, kind of doing some underhanded things to really work the limb, which I thought was interesting. I thought we were going to see Punk in that role. It was a great back and forth match. The ending saw the ref get knocked down, down. Randy Orton returned, hit the RKO on Cody. Then Punk rolled in, pinned Cody 1, 2, 3. I think the purpose of this match was to purposely leave people wanting more. I think this is not the last time we're going to see these two lock up, and especially not in this way. I think WWE wanted to just give us a taste of it. Say, hey, here's the first match, good guy versus good guy. I think in the match itself, you can tell they purposely didn't go all out. They were leaving something there for a future rematch. Obviously, this sets up Cody to reignite his feud with Randy, and hopefully they can do that feud right this time around. As for what's next for Punk, we'll get to that when we get to night 2, but I'm really liking how that's looking. So going back to how this was one of the most anticipated matches for me, I don't feel let down. I feel like I was teased. I feel like they purposely planted those seeds, purposely did this first match, and I don't think this is the last time we're going to see these two wrestle. And the night 1 main event was Femi versus Brock Lesnar. Hell in a Cell. Let's just say what's obvious. Femi is the man. Femi is a future world champion sooner rather than later, I hope. The way that he's burst on the scene and just instantly connected with the fans, the way that he burst on the scene and just instantly clicked with the fans is something to be studied. This is a bona fide superstar for WWE. When he beat Brock at WrestleMania in only a few minutes, and then it seemed like Brock was retiring, it seemed like, okay, they are strapping the rocket to this guy in a way in which we haven't seen in a very long time. Ironically enough, we haven't seen someone be rocket strapped like this since Brock Lesnar. Obviously, Brock did like the retirement, and then they did the rematch, and then Brock won that one, and it was kind of confusing, and then Oba won King of the Ring, but then was like, I'm gonna forego my title shot because I got unfinished business with Brock. Obviously, there was a trilogy planned. It was kind of confusing how they did it. I hope this means that Oba still is entitled to a title shot down the line, because it would make no sense if he won the tournament and then just never gets a title shot. As for the match, it is what it is. It was Hell in a Cell, but it didn't even really need to be Hell in a Cell. They didn't really use the cell in any way. I think they went through like a table or two. That was cool. The ending was pretty sick, where Brock like tore up the mat and exposed the boards, and then he hit Oba with like a tombstone pile driver on the wood, like RIP Brock Lesnar's knees, because I knew that probably had to hurt. Oba kicks out, grabs Brock, hits him with the fall to grace. 1, 2, 3, match over. And then we saw something very uncharacteristic of Brock Lesnar. He got on the mic, said that he was the past, Femi is the future, and really put Oba over in a way in which we've never seen Brock do that. He obviously had that moment with Cody a few years ago at SummerSlam where he like gave him a hug and dapped him up, but this was totally different. This was Brock Lesnar openly co-signing he is winding down and this guy is the future, and there's no bigger endorsement than that. Let me reiterate this again one more time. Femi is a star. I need to see Oba versus Roman for the world title ASAP. I think sometimes WWE gets cold feet on guys. We kind of saw that with Braun Breaker earlier this year, but with Oba, they need to just go for it. They need to just capitalize. Sometimes you got to just strike while the iron's hot, and if it doesn't work out, you can pivot, but they got to go all in on Oba right now, and it seems like obviously they are. Yeah, so that was it for night 1. Overall, I thought a good show. Did it have some issues? Sure. Did it have some of the TKO ad celebrity crossover? Yeah, not as bad as WrestleMania. I think they kind of learned their mistake from that. And obviously WrestleMania is different than SummerSlam in terms of presentation and eyes on the product, but I would say like night 1, net positive. I thought it was good, and night 2, as we get into it, only gonna be better. Hey, before we get into night 2, if you enjoy what you're seeing, please like the video, please drop me a subscribe. I got all my social media links down in the description. It helps a ton. Thank you so much. Now, kicking off night 2, we had Finn Balor versus Sami Zayn as the #1 contender for the WWE Championship, or at least that's what it was on paper. Out comes Nick Aldis and says that another entrant is going to be added to this match. And I think we were all waiting with bated breath, reading some of the rumors online, and it was Gunther. Kind of took the wind out of my sails for a minute, and I thought, okay, I guess that makes sense, especially what happened with last night. I can't complain about Gunther not being in the title scene, and then he gets a shot at the title, so I was like, okay, it is what it is. But then Nick Aldis said he didn't just say he was adding 1 participant, he said he was adding 2, and at this moment, I had a feeling as to what was coming. I was sitting on my couch, freaking out, being like, yup, here we go. And we saw the long-awaited, I think they said 17-month return of Kevin Owens. I love Kevin Owens. Going back to that kind of like HD net era of Ring of Honor, Kevin Owens has been a guy that has always held a place in my heart as one of those like wrestlers that every time he's on screen, I'm just like, hell yeah, love him. And when it seemed like there was a chance that he was never going to wrestle again, it seemed like really sad. Like it seemed like a guy that obviously has done so much in this business, but still had a lot to offer. And the thought of a guy that has poured so much into wrestling kind of getting it taken away from him without getting closure was really upsetting. I mean, we've seen that recently with someone like Big E. But Kevin Owens isn't done. And in fact, he came out, he didn't hold back. He was hitting like dives, he was hitting swantons, he was doing the cannonballs in the corner. And even my wife was watching, being like, wait, didn't this guy just get like neck surgery? That can be great for your neck. But Kevin Owens even said it on the post show, even if it's just for another year or two, he's not coming back to phone it in. He's not coming back to hold back. He's coming back to be Kevin Owens at full force. I thought this match was great. I felt like when it was kicking into another gear, it kind of just ended. It felt like if they had another like 3 to 5 minutes, it could have made the match even better. But I thought it was a great opener. The reactions for all these guys were great. It's really been great to see Finn Balor really get back in the mix, get away from the Judgment Day, be on SmackDown, getting some wins, kind of being in that upper echelon again. And yeah, Kevin Owens won the match as the #1 contender for the WWE Championship. And who is the WWE Champion after last night? CM Punk. Next, we had Baron Corbin versus Trick Williams for the U.S. title. I thought it's been good to see Baron Corbin come back. I felt like he was a guy that really got the short end of the stick, especially in like 2019, 2020, when he was just put in some like really bad situations that did not help him at all. He's always been like just a solid like upper card heel. And I think that's exactly what the SmackDown mid-card division needed right now. This match wasn't anything special, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I know a lot of people were confused as to why Baron beat Trick for the U.S. title. And I think on paper, it doesn't make sense, but I think when you think of the long game with Trick Williams, it makes a ton of sense. I think Baron needed to win the title to kind of legitimize his return right off the back. I think he kind of needed that so that the crowd could take him serious. And the U.S. title is just the start for Trick Williams. I mean, we have Money in the Bank coming up, and he's absolutely a guy that could win Money in the Bank. So while this kind of seemed like an abrupt end to Trick's reign, I think this is actually going to be a good thing. Like we could see Baron defending against guys like Carmelo Hayes, and we could see Trick kind of moving on to bigger and better things. Yeah, I think this was good. I think on paper it doesn't make sense, but long term it will play out and it will make sense. And I think it's actually kind of good for the SmackDown's US title and like upper mid card scene. Next, we had a ladder match for the interim women's championship. We saw Tiffany Stratton, Chelsea Green, Charlotte Flair, Lash Legend, and Jade Cargill all compete in this match. I think the interim title for the women's championship is very interesting. Rhea Ripley, I think, is out with a knee injury, and instead of just stripping her of the title, WWE has done a rare interim thing. I can't think of how many times they've done this, but I haven't seen it in recent memory. I think this probably means that Rhea is out for enough time to miss SummerSlam, but not out like long term, so it kind of made sense to do the interim thing. It definitely was interesting because in the past there hasn't really been a precedent for something like this. I thought the match was fine. I think it's hard with some of these multi-person ladder matches. It can get kind of clunky at times. I think especially with Jade and Lash kind of having that powerhouse role, like usually there's only one person in that match, but it seemed like they had both of them, and I think they both kind of got their shine. I think Lash has a ton of upside, but it's still kind of like learning and growing. The crowd really reacted for the eventual winner, Chelsea Green. There was a time where it looked like she was going to win, and then B-Fab and Michin ran out, and it seemed like, oh, they had squashed all hopes of Chelsea winning, and she was kind of just like dangling from the ladder. And then at the end of there, they had all the women kind of fighting on the ladder while Chelsea was dangling down. Everybody kind of falls. Chelsea rises up, and you saw the crowd come unglued. Chelsea climbed up, got the belt. Super happy for her. I almost wonder if this is a way for them to kind of test how over Chelsea Green is. I mean, obviously she's super over with the crowd. Obviously there's been like some people backstage, like we watched WWE Unreal, that maybe don't fully believe in her in that role. And maybe this is a way for them to kind of like test it out. They did say that this will be an official recognized reign, so that's awesome. And I think sometimes the interim situation, even in other sports, can kind of get confusing with that. Super happy for Chelsea Green, super well deserved. I think she's someone that every time she's on camera makes the most of it, and I think she will surprise a lot of people with this reign, and I think hopefully legitimize her as a top contender for the title. I think unfortunately this was just the, hey, who's the person to lose to Rhea Ripley? I think that's the kind of situation they booked themselves into, and that's not a bad thing. Obviously they have plans for Rhea and for the title, but I really hope Chelsea gets to kind of make the most out of what she's given for however long that is. Next, we had Danhausen against Dominik Mysterio in a human monies on a pole match. I feel like we're back in WCW with a gimmick like this. All joking aside, obviously Danhausen has become one of the most popular superstars that WWE has right now, and I think that's a good thing, and I do think that there is some trepidatiousness with me with that in some ways. I think Danhausen's great. It is crazy to see how hard he has connected and how fast with the WWE audience, but it really makes sense. It's something different. It's something fun, which I think is sorely missed right now in WWE. But I do think it's one of those things that is best used in doses. I think overexposing Danhausen kind of waters down the character a little bit, and that's the one thing that I kind of worry about, especially when there was a report that came out that said that TKO wants as much Danhausen across the shows as possible. I worry that they're just going to keep doubling down on this, and it's going to kind of hurt Danhausen in the long run, and maybe WWE isn't worried about that. They're just like, hey, let's squeeze as much out of this guy as quickly as we can. I think the way he's been presented thus far has been great, but I think we're teetering up to that line, and I'm just hoping that they don't go over it. As for Dominik Mysterio, this has been one of the things I've been most critical about WWE lately. It is really interesting to see a guy that was so over, that beat John Cena on his last PLE for John Cena's last title, kind of relegated to where he is now. You can kind of almost see it in Dom's demeanor and even some of his social media presence. It seems like he is frustrated with this spot, and I think that's understandable. If you go back and look at the reaction Dominik got when he won the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 41, it really seemed like the crowd was wanting him to step up, maybe even turn face, but really just be in a major role. I know last summer he had some injuries, but he had a great match with AJ Styles at last year's SummerSlam. Obviously went on and had that feud with John Cena, which I thought was a sign of Dominik really getting up the card, really getting propelled to a guy that, hey, could win Money in the Bank, could kind of be in that upper echelon of superstars. If you look at the way that he's presented on AAA and you look at the way he's presented lately on WWE, I do think it's a little bit of night and day. And AAA, he does feel like that main event superstar. Obviously, it's a smaller pond, but I think his abilities are there. And Danhausen won the match. It is what it is. It was a Danhausen match. We saw the Mini-Hausens come out. We saw Joe Hendry get involved. We saw JD get involved. And this is kind of what I was expecting for the match. I kind of wanted Dominik to win, to at least like him be the person to give Danhausen his first loss. I thought that'd be good for kind of like reheating Dominik, but Danhausen won, and it's really kind of a head scratcher as to what's next for Dominik. If you would ask me a few months ago, I would have said he should be winning Money in the Bank. Still a possibility, but I do think that WWE, an example of what I talked about earlier, like they got to strike when the iron is hot on some of these guys, whether it be Dominik, whether it be Braun Breaker. Obviously, they're doing that with Oba Femi, but I think it's because he checks all of their boxes and the crowd reaction has just been to such a high degree. Perception is reality, and I don't want to see Dominik fall so far down the card that it's hard to get him back up. I think WWE needs to pivot. I think Judgment Day as a whole across the board needs to either break up or be shook up. Something needs to give in Judgment Day. Next, we saw Chad Gable taking on Penta for the Intercontinental Championship. For me, this was maybe my most anticipated match for the weekend. I knew like before the bell rang, like this is probably going to be match of the weekend, like hands down, especially from like a wrestling standpoint. It was cool. On WWE's YouTube channel, they were kind of doing this vlog following Chad Gable in the week leading up to this match. You got to see him like train and him be with his family, him be in his hometown, visiting his high school and wrestling coaches and stuff like that. Between that and the personal kind of vlog that Chad Gable's been doing, I think it's really shown like the personality and the person of Chad Gable, especially after that mask versus mask match. Like it is super hard to not just root for this guy and really want the best for him. And coming off mask versus mask, I think WWE did something that they don't usually do, and it really surprised me. First, they really capitalized on that match, showing it as a replay after Raw one time. And more importantly, and this is something I've been critical with the Bloodline story about, we saw Chad Gable have to atone for all the sins that he did while he was a heel. We saw Chad Gable go to Rey Fenix, go to Rey Mysterio, go to Penta, and apologize for what he was doing, making a mockery of Lucha for the parody that he was doing. Very rarely do we see heels, once they switch back to face, kind of atone for that. It's something I wish we saw more. It's something that I wish Roman did with the Usos before they just jumped back on board. I think it's the little storytelling beats that actually like are logical that helps things really tie together. And as it relates to Gable and Penta, Gable was Penta's first opponent when Penta came to WWE and kind of the beginning of Chad turning into El Grande Americano. So in a weird way, way there was this thread tying this match back together. I thought Penta's been a great IC champion, getting regular defenses on Raw, kind of in that mid-card with Rusev and Javon Evans and Ethan Page. But it seemed like the stars were aligning for Gable to finally win his first singles title in his home state, in his hometown here in Minnesota. And that's exactly what happened. We saw back and forth action. We saw some really good spots. But the end of the match came when Gable grapevined the leg and locked in the ankle lock, and Penta tapped out. And Chad Gable is the new Intercontinental Champion. And then kind of like what we saw with Nick Aldis after his match, we saw Chad Gable's family get in the ring. We saw him say his name and where he's from, kind of as like a call back to the mask versus mask match. We saw the crowd react huge for his speech. It was really cool to see his family in the ring with him. Obviously, they've been featured over the years, sitting in the front row. And like I said, they were documented in that vlog that they did leading up to the match. And then WWE just couldn't help themselves because they had the mug root beer dog get in and hand Chad Gable 2 mug root beers, and he did like the Stone Cold with them and ad placement and haha and whatever. I just couldn't help but laugh. And I was also like, mug root beer? That's so random. I'm really interested to see what happens with Penta. I think it's possible that we could get like on a B pay-per-view like a Penta versus Roman for the world title match, and that would be kind of sick. I would be super into that. I'm really interested to see what they do with Penta. And then to cap things off, we had Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Before we kind of get into this match and the backstory of it, I'm just going to say where I stand with this match. This may be controversial, and I totally understand if people disagree with this, but I did not like this match. I'm going to be completely honest. I think this match, for me, I think this match exemplifies everything that kind of frustrates me with modern wrestling. And what I mean by that is this kind of like weird paced finisher spam, cinema. I know a lot of people are probably going to be pissed at that storytelling that WWE, particularly Roman's matches, do. Conversely, I felt like the story and the pace that they told with Punk and Roman at WrestleMania this year was perfect. I thought that match was incredible, but I don't feel like it worked the same way here. I understand that both guys have so much story, and I've seen a lot of people online criticizing like, oh, they just keep talking about the Shield and the chair and all that. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what the story is. This is a 12-year story that in some way is coming to a head right here. I don't have any problems with that. That makes sense. That is what was great about this match, is that it had all of this story. I just don't know, for me, if it is the best way to tell the story with guys not wrestling for like 2 minutes at a time, talking to each other and doing all this little like whispering. I think during COVID, it worked well. When we had no crowds, that was the pivot they needed to make. But now we're back in arenas. I think sometimes this kind of like cinema, aura farming, whatever it is, just isn't clicking always. During the match, we saw Michael Cole say like, oh, they're fighting out in the crowd, like the referee's giving them some leeway, which makes sense. For these big main events, I get the kind of like bending of the rules. I don't have a problem with that. What I do think is funny is when they got back ringside, Roman rolled in to break the count. It's like, brother, we're way past that. And then on top of that, and I get why they did it, they did the ref bump so they could get the chair, and it's like, well, they should have just made it no DQ at this point. And the chair came into play, and Roman had an opportunity to get revenge on Seth and hit him like he did at WrestleMania 40. Roman decided not to. Roman hits a pair of spears, 1, 2, 3, pins Rollins finally right in the middle of the ring. And I don't hate this match. I don't think it was a bad match by any stretch of the imagination, but it is hard when we kind of do like the same pacing and storytelling for Roman's matches over and over and over again. I get that they feel different compared to everyone else's, and sometimes I think that's a good thing. And I think for here, it just didn't really work in the way that it did with Punk. They did have a cool moment at the end there where they kind of like did the Shield fist, and it felt like that chapter had finally been closed. I'm interested to see where the Bloodline story goes. Like I said, I don't want to see them keep rehashing it. I want to see some evolution, and I think we have an opportunity to do that in the next couple of months. To summarize, I thought this year's SummerSlam was a huge upgrade from this year's WrestleMania. Like I said earlier, obviously they're different shows, different eyeballs on it. On WrestleMania, of course, we're going to get way more ads, way more celebrity crossover. That makes sense. I do think that it was toned down a little bit. I mean, there was still a ton, but I expected more. And I think that's just where WWE's at with TKO. I mean, obviously, right? Like, we're going to have all these crossovers. We're going to have all these ad placements. And listen, all sports have that. All sports and all entertainment have that. I think that it was just abrupt for WWE. It like kind of like slowly crept its way in when TKO started, and then it was just all over the product. If you look back at the history of WWE, they've always had crossovers with both celebrities and athletes going all the way back to WrestleMania 1. So in a way, there's nothing new here. I think it's just in the way that it's presented and in the scale. So going back to my question, did SummerSlam save the WWE? No. I don't think it did. And I don't know if WWE necessarily needs to be saved right now, or can it be saved right now? What I will say is I felt like I would put this show in the net positive column for recent shows for WWE. It felt like for the most part, everything that needed to happen happened. It made sense. I think wrestling doesn't need to be this super hard, unpredictable thing. Sometimes when the right things happen and the right winners are chosen, even if it is obvious, that's all the crowd and the people watching at home want. We didn't need any swerves. We didn't need any fake outs. We just needed the people that were over, that needed to win, for the crowd to enjoy what they were seeing, for the people at home to enjoy what they were watching, and for you to sit here and watch me talk about it. All jokes aside, thank you so much for sitting here watching me talk about SummerSlam. I've been periodically uploading wrestling videos. I'm going to get more active with it. You can follow me on TikTok, where I post wrestling clips almost daily now. Like I said, if you can subscribe or like the video, it's a huge help. I appreciate everyone that does, and I'll be back soon talking wrestling right here.